In the past few months, the game of NES Tetris has been absolutely revolutionized. Cheese introduced rolling into the community earlier in the year after being inspired by Hector Fly's rolling technique, which he had mastered decades ago. Rolling goes against the idea of traditional button pressing for NES Tetris, where in this case, the 5 individual fingers account for button presses on the bottom of the controller instead of the top, allowing the thumb of the other hand to absorb the shock of the NES controller's movement onto the D-pad. This allows for piece movement speed of up to 30 taps a second, almost twice as fast as even the most skilled hyper tappers. The most inputs you need for any piece in NES Tetris is 5 to get the pieces all the way to the left vertically, and so this has opened up seemingly infinite potential for most rolling players. This is best seen on level 29 speed, which was previously known as the kill screen. It wasn't even really playable until hyper tappers entered the scene several years ago, but for skilled rollers, they demonstrated how that speed can be essentially destroyed, setting up for Tetrises with ease. Cheese got the first score world record done entirely with rolling in June of this year with 1.461 million, and ever since it's been an endless barrage of rolling dominance. After information became widely available about how to replicate Cheese's rolling playstyle, several players have already picked up rolling and they've shown serious skill with it. One of these players is Jounce, and his history with the game didn't start with rolling. Initially playing DAS, he achieved a pretty respectable personal best of over 800,000 in October of last year, but his play excelled once rolling came to light. Jounce picked up the playstyle exceptionally fast, getting a max out within just a few months of learning to roll, and he wasn't done there. One thing that is apparent about Jounce's rolling is that he is possibly the most consistent out of all players who roll, having tied the record for most consecutive max outs in 1.1 million scores. Rolling's consistency has been a hot topic in the community as of late. One of the criticisms with rolling has been how often players might misdrop pieces, which happens when a player shifts a piece in an unintended spot. With 5 fingers in the mix, it becomes more likely to have errors like this arise due to there being more variables than the 2 other main playstyles. However, when rolling is perfected, it produces some historical results, and this was seen in Jounce's performance in the classic Tetris Monthly Masters event. This game is played in the blue bracket of the tournament, which would end up crowning a semi-finalist for the final stage of the tournament later in the month. Jounce was facing Odin Logi, who's a respectable hyper-tapper in his own right. Jounce would get off to a sluggish start, with him failing to chase down Odin's score after he had topped out early, giving Odin the first win of the match. This made Jounce question his own consistency in the tournament setting. As we would soon find out though, Jounce's skill wouldn't be in doubt. Jounce showed his strengths early on, playing some exceptionally efficient Tetris. At 100 lines into the match, he had scored 530,000 points, which is well on pace to enter level 19 with a score of 600,000. He easily cleared over that mark, getting a 695,000 score at the transition point. This was one of the highest documented scores at this point in a tournament match. Jounce wouldn't slow down either. After Odin topped out early, Jounce would continue playing, getting a max out early into level 24, which is nearly early as possible given near perfect play. From a max out onwards, players utilize a Game Genie code to modify the scoring system. Here, the scoring system uses the alphabet, where A is 1.0 million, B is 1.1, and so on. Jounce would continue with this historic pace into the later part of the post-transition, making some incredibly smart moves along the way. Upon entering the kill screen, Jounce had a score of 1.352 million. This was among the highest recorded scores to enter the kill screen ever, so it is incredibly anomalous that this took place in a tournament setting. Jounce was also on the doorstep of the record for the highest recorded score in a tournament, which was a record set by Dog in the classic Tetris Monthly tournament back in June with 1.37 million. Jounce had already exceeded all possible expectations in this game, but as we would soon figure out, there was a good reason as to why rollers have dominated as of late.
Oh no! Oh, oh my god! Can you believe it? Unbelievable! A 1.6!
If you weren't keeping track of where the score ended up, honestly, I don't blame you. The code used to uncap the score past 1 million is not able to process anything past an F score. So here we saw the first instance of the score rolling over, with a seemingly mythical score of 1.627 million. This completely destroyed any precedent of what could be possible in the game of NES Tetris, even for a roller. Out of all reactions to the score, Odin's has to be the best. He left the scene likely knowing that Jounce was on a good pace, but his return encapsulates exactly how us as viewers were reacting. Now, why was this score so far ahead of the rest? Well, in short, it had nearly every aspect of high-level NES Tetris play come together all at once. During the course of the match, Jounce sustained a high Tetris rate, which essentially quantifies the amount of lines burned in between Tetrises. Here, Tetrises have the highest scoring potential out of all line clears, and so Jounce's sustained efficiency ensured that his pace would remain high. Once the game sped up to the transition point, one would have expected that his Tetris rate would have dropped off, but this was far from the case. With each level from the transition and beyond, the points scored for each Tetris continues to increase, and so Jounce capitalized on this by playing as efficient as before. Given the small sample size of rollers, Jounce had by far the most anomalous score when entering the kill screen out of all of them. All of the score world records done with rolling had made up a very high portion of points in the kill screen, with all of them entering the kill screen at well below 1.3 million points. This high score into 29 gave Jounce ample runway not only to obtain the world record, but to go way beyond it. Jounce was able to extend the game all the way to level 41, with the level count being just as broken as the score counter was. The devs did not intend for anyone to get even close to past 29. Rolling's short history had culminated in a record that seemed almost otherworldly. Shortly after, the record would make waves across the community. The record was also highlighted in various news articles, which shows just how notable the accomplishment was. The story of Jounce's triumph from picking up rolling was a perfect headline. The story seemed too ideal. And well, Jounce's score world record would open up an entirely new can of worms. There was little suspicion about Jounce being seriously good at rolling. He had documented his improvement with rolling, including many uses of a hand cam to confirm that his rolling was in fact legit. In a live format, it would have been impossible to fabricate a score of that caliber. That's the thing. It isn't that Jounce's world record was fake. It's just that, well, Jounce was fake. This information came to light during the production of this video. I still found it important to document how the record was seen on the day it was accomplished. It gives a glimpse into the mystique of the record itself, seeing it for what it was when Jounce was still the mysterious faceless roller. It wasn't until the day after that his identity would be revealed. Several top rollers were already aware, but as the rest of the NES Tetris community would soon find out. Hydrant Dude was a roller whose skill with the playstyle seemed to come almost out of nowhere. He already had a pretty storied history with the game utilizing hypertapping, but rolling only accelerated his skill. He first published a video to his main channel demonstrating his rolling back in July, and within just a month of that, he would get his first 1.4 million score. In fact, at the time of his 1.6 million on the Jounce account, he already had obtained the world record, with a 1.464 million achieved on a 19th start. While getting the world record on an alt account is a rather deceitful thing to pull off, I honestly don't believe it was entirely malicious. In the end, feats achieved were not faked in the slightest, and Hydrant will still retain his world record score. The progression might have not been fabricated, but the story of Jounce certainly was. This part was especially seen as a gut punch, since the story of a DAS player going on to nearly double their PB with the new rolling playstyle was seen as inspirational, and it might still be. There are several members of the community who have picked up rolling from other playstyles, only to go on to achieve prolific results. Tegamek messed around with the playstyle earlier in the year, and he's shown that it is possible to still have great results when switching from DAS, having a 1.2 million achieved entirely with rolling. There's also speculation that Terry Purcell, a CTWC veteran and fellow DAS player, has also gotten a max out with rolling. While it might not be possible to progress as fast as Jounce did, the potential is still there, and in the end, 1.6 will still be a benchmark for how a player can absolutely annihilate all possible expectations in the game of NES Tetris. Now with that said, what will the 1.6 mean for the competitive Tetris scene? First, let me state the obvious. This record eliminates any chance of a hypertapper ever having the score record again. While there have been 1.4s done with hypertapping, anything higher would require significant kill screen play. This is possible for maybe the fastest hypertappers, but only in short bursts. Even the best kill screen games from hypertappers don't come close to what Hydrant pulled off in his 1.6 million, and this was on top of incredible play beforehand. This is a similar occurrence to when hypertapping took over DAS with the score world record back in 2018. From that point onwards, DAS players really couldn't keep up with the open potential from tapping, and this is the same for tapping versus rolling. Now in terms of competitive play, rolling will almost certainly shake up the scene, and in some ways it already has. This has to do with how kill screen extends the length of matches. An average game of NES Tetris from a level 18 start all the way to kill screen is about 8 to 9 minutes, but with the ability to play up to a dozen levels past 29, games quickly become more stretched out. For reference, Hydrant's level 44 on the Jounce account had over 4 minutes of kill screen play, and we're only seeing the beginning of how rollers play 29. This isn't much of an issue yet, since there are certainly hypertappers who can extend the game much like rollers have, but considering that we are in the first 6 months that information about rolling is public, it can be said that this is only the beginning. This brings up a unique concept that wasn't even thought of just a few months ago. That concept is infinite play. Now, let me clarify. This isn't infinite play in the literal sense, as there is no way for a roller to play the game infinitely, even if they wanted to. With each new milestone though, the top rollers are getting closer and closer to being able to extend nearly every game to absurd lengths. For example, the world record for most lines in any given game by a DAS player is 246 lines by Green Tea, near the very end of level 30. However, the world record for most lines by a 29 start for a roller is 247. That's the length of an entire game of NES Tetris just on 29 speed alone. When considering that the points scored for each line clear scale up with every level, it becomes apparent as to how easily rollers can rake in the points. This brings up another point, which is maybe the most important for this situation: efficient Tetris play. This was never even an argument prior to rollers dominating the scene, as even with hypertappers having a speed advantage over DAS players in competition, it was still incentivized to play as efficiently as one can manage, with the thought that there was no guarantee that a tapper could get much in the way of points past 29. Rollers are still incentivized to play as efficiently as possible, but their reward for making it to level 29 and beyond is way bigger than DAS or hypertappers. Comebacks from major deficits do make entertaining play, and of course there are already disparities between tap and DAS players for kill screen play, but rolling is an entirely new animal altogether. It allows for games to go on way longer than intended, which is a major issue when trying to run a compact and entertaining tournament format. This begs the question: is there a way to retain the fun efficiency of tournaments without giving a significant handicap to kill screen rolling? This has been a discussion topic in the community recently, and one suggestion was a level cap, with level 39 being one of the proposed limits. The idea here is that rollers would be incentivized to do more than just line out past 29, especially if they're at a major point deficit. Instead, they'd be incentivized to try to get Tetrises. There is a ROM that allows for kill screen speed to be doubled, and this could possibly be implemented for level 39 speed in competitive play. The issue to this solution is that every Tetris player would need an EverDrive to run the version on NES, which not everyone has access to. There's also the idea of just not counting points in a competition past level 39. The issue is that these cutoffs just seem a bit arbitrary. This was just the first time that someone had gotten past level 40 in competition. Nobody had really come close, with the previous world record in competition being only level 37. Regardless of rolling skill, big kill screen runs are just not a guaranteed thing. Still, Hydrant pulling off what he did in a tournament setting opens up so many questions. The game of NES Tetris has been praised for being an almost accidentally perfect game for single player and competitive play, but this was thrown out the window once rolling came around. The arguments for limits on kill screen are purely speculative at this point in time, since rollers have only been extending the possibilities of the game for a few months now. Though, that likely means that this is just the start. And soon enough, Hydrant's 1.6 might only be a footnote in the history of how the game has been absolutely destroyed. A footnote with possibly the greatest fake story beside it, that is. Thanks for watching. This was a bit of a detour from my Marble Blast videos, but I just love the game of NES Tetris too much to avoid this topic. I'm beginning my own rolling journey, so hopefully I'll be able to document that progress in the future. If you stuck all the way to the end, a like would be much appreciated. Thank you so much to everyone who made this possible. See you soon.